My name is Colleen. I can still remember that Thanksgiving in Kansas City as if it were yesterday. I walked into my parents' house carrying two pieces of news I had dreamed of sharing. I had just gotten engaged, and I'd landed my very first book deal. It should have been a night of celebration, laughter, and warmth. But deep down, I knew what was waiting for me. My family has always found a way to tear me down, no matter what I achieved. And sure enough, over dinner, my parents suddenly shouted, "You're the most useless child in this family." My sister, sitting right beside me, smirked and added, "No one expects anything from you." The table fell silent. My heart pounded in my chest as every eye turned toward me. The weight of years of silence and resentment pressed down on my shoulders. They had no idea that this time I wasn't going to stay quiet. What I said next stunned everyone, and it changed everything. If your family ever humiliated you in front of everyone, what would you have said? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how you would have handled it. Looking back, I realize my family's disregard for me wasn't just a Thanksgiving outburst, it was a lifetime pattern. Growing up in Kansas City, I was the middle child, sandwiched between my older brother and younger sister. My brother, a software engineer, was the golden boy always praised for his brains. My sister, a finance whiz, was the princess showered with attention for her charm. Me, I was just Colleen, the one who faded into the background no matter how hard I tried. As a kid, I'd spend hours studying, hoping to earn a nod from mom or dad. But their eyes always lit up for my brother's math awards or my sister's debate trophies. Once in fifth grade, I wrote a short story that won a school contest. I rushed home clutching the certificate, thinking they'd finally see me. Mom glanced at it, said, "That's nice, Colleen," and turned to brag about my brother's science fair win. Dad didn't even look up from his newspaper. That moment stung, but it was just the start. By high school, I was pouring my heart into writing, dreaming of becoming an author. I'd stay up late crafting stories, but Mom would roll her eyes, saying, "Writing's a hobby, not a career. Look at your brother's stable job." Dad chimed in, "Your sister's already interning at a bank. Why can't you be practical?" Their words cut deep, and I started to believe I'd never measure up. Despite that, I couldn't help but step up for my family. When Grandpa Mom's dad got sick in my early 20s, I was the one driving him to doctor's appointments, sitting with him during chemo, and making sure he took his meds. My brother was too busy with his tech startup, and my sister claimed her finance job left no time. I didn't mind at first. Grandpa was kind, and I loved his stories about teaching history at the university. But when I mentioned it to Mom, she shrugged. "That's just what families do. No thank you, no recognition." I also took on organizing family events like Dad's 60th birthday party. I spent weeks planning, booking the venue, and designing invitations, all while juggling freelance writing gigs. My sister showed up with a fancy watch for Dad, and my brother sent a check from across the country. Guess who got the praise? Not me. Mom beamed at them, saying, "You two make us so proud." I stood there holding a tray of appetizers I'd made, feeling invisible. Even smaller things piled up. When my sister needed help preparing for her CPA exam, I spent hours quizzing her, sacrificing my own deadlines. She passed, and Mom threw a big dinner to celebrate, gushing about her brilliant girl. I wasn't even mentioned. When my brother's startup hit a rough patch, I stayed up late editing his investor pitches. He got funding, and Dad toasted his success at a family barbecue. My name never came up. The worst part? They'd call me whenever they needed something. Mom would say, "Colleen, can you handle Grandpa's appointment?" Or, "Colleen, the family reunion needs organizing." I always said yes, thinking it'd make them see my worth. But it never did. They'd take my time, my effort, and then turn around and praise my siblings for their real achievements. By my 30s, I was exhausted. I'd built a decent freelance writing career, but Mom still called it scribbling. Dad would ask when I'd get a proper job like my brother. My sister, meanwhile, loved pointing out how her finance career was actually contributing to the world. Their words burned, but I kept showing up, hoping one day they'd notice me. That Thanksgiving, I walked into their house thinking maybe my big news would change things. I drove to my parents' house, my stomach in knots. I'd spent weeks crafting gifts for everyone, hoping they'd finally see my effort. In my bag were a hand-stitched table runner for the dining room and a scrapbook filled with family photos I'd painstakingly collected from old albums. I'd stayed up late designing each page, thinking it'd spark some warmth, maybe even a smile. My heart raced with anticipation, but a familiar dread lingered. My family never valued what I did. As I pulled into the driveway, I took a deep breath and stepped out, clutching my gifts. Mom greeted me at the door, her lips pursed. "You're late again," she said, barely glancing at me before turning back inside. I followed her into the living room where my sister was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up, smirked, and said, "Nice to see you finally made it, Colleen." Her tone dripped with sarcasm, and I bit my lip to keep from snapping back. I set my gifts on the coffee table, hoping for a reaction. "I made these for everyone," I said, pulling out the table runner. Mom raised an eyebrow and muttered, "That's quaint. Did you get it at a thrift store?" My sister laughed, not even looking at it, and said, "Cute, but it doesn't really match the vibe here." I forced a smile, my chest tightening. Dad walked in, saw the runner, and shrugged. "It's fine," he said, then turned to my sister. "Did you bring that wine you mentioned? That's what we need for tonight." My brother arrived shortly after, carrying a sleek, leather-bound planner for Mom and a high-end coffee machine for Dad. Mom's face lit up. "Oh, you always know what we love," she said, hugging him tightly. My sister chimed in, presenting a designer scarf she'd bought for Mom. "I saw it and thought of you," she said, earning a beaming smile. My gift sat untouched, pushed to the side as Mom fawned over their offerings. I swallowed hard, trying to shake off the sting. Trying to shift the mood, I pulled out the scrapbook. "I put this together for the family," I said, flipping it open to show photos from our childhood vacations, birthdays, moments I thought they'd cherish. Mom barely glanced at it before saying, "That's sweet, but we don't need old pictures cluttering things up." My sister rolled her eyes. "Colleen, nobody has time for that," she said, then turned to Dad. "Did I tell you about my latest deal at work? Huge client." Dad nodded, clearly impressed, and launched into a story about her promotion. I stood there clutching the scrapbook, my face burning. I'd spent hours on it, thinking it'd mean something. Instead, it was dismissed like it was nothing. Dad didn't even comment, just kept praising my sister's career. My brother, meanwhile, was showing Mom how to use the coffee machine, and she was gushing about how thoughtful he was. My gifts were still on the table, ignored, as if I hadn't even tried. Grandpa came downstairs, moving slowly with his cane. He saw the scrapbook and smiled. "You did this, Colleen?" he asked, his voice warm. I nodded, grateful for his attention, but Mom cut in before I could answer. "Let's not get sidetracked," she said. "We need to set the table for dinner." My sister smirked again, whispering to Dad, "She's always trying to make everything about her." Dad didn't disagree, just gave a slight nod. I helped carry dishes to the dining room, my hands shaking. Every jab, every dismissal felt like a knife twisting deeper. I kept telling myself to stay calm, that dinner might be different. Maybe when I shared my news, they'd finally see me. But as we finished setting up, Mom looked at me and said, "Colleen, try not to mess anything up tonight." My sister laughed, and Dad stayed silent, his eyes on his phone. I gripped the edge of the table, my resolve crumbling, and headed into the dinner I'd been dreading. When the whole family sat down at the dinner table, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was my moment to shine. I adjusted my napkin, took a deep breath, and prepared to share my engagement and book deal. The table was crowded with my parents, my sister, my brother, and Grandpa, all chatting over the clink of glasses. I waited for a pause, my heart pounding with anticipation, ready to finally be heard. "Everyone," I started, my voice steady, "I have some big news." But before I could finish, Mom cut me off. "Hold on, Colleen," she said, waving her hand dismissively. Your brother was just telling us about his new project at work. Go ahead, son. My brother leaned forward, launching into a story about his latest software launch, his voice brimming with confidence. Mom beamed, nodding along while Dad hung on every word, asking follow-up questions. I sank back in my chair, my words stuck in my throat. When he finished, I tried again. Okay, so I wanted to share, but my sister interrupted, her tone sharp. Can we talk about something actually worth hearing? She said, smirking. I just closed a massive deal at work. My boss says I'm on track for a promotion. Mom clapped her hands, gushing, "That's my girl, always making us proud." Dad raised his glass, toasting her success. My stomach churned, but I forced a smile, gripping my fork tightly. The conversation rolled on, with Mom and Dad praising my brother's leadership and my sister's ambition. I sat there silent, feeling like a ghost at my own family's table. Grandpa tried to change the subject, asking about my writing, but Mom brushed him off. "Let's not bore everyone with that," she said, shooting me a look. My sister snickered, muttering, "Yeah, no one cares about her little stories." That was it. My patience snapped. I set my fork down, the clatter cutting through their chatter. "You know what," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I'm tired of this. Every time I try to share something, you shut me down. You act like I'm nothing." Mom's eyes widened, but she didn't interrupt. My sister scoffed, crossing her arms. Dad just stared, his mouth slightly open. "I was going to tell you I got engaged," I continued, my voice rising. "And I landed a book deal, a big one. But you don't care. You never have." My sister rolled her eyes, muttering, "Oh, here we go." Mom leaned forward, her tone icy. "Colleen, stop making a scene. You're the most useless child in this family. Always whining, never contributing anything real." My sister nodded, adding, "No one expects anything from you, Colleen. Why would we?" Their words hit like a punch, echoing every doubt I'd carried for years, but instead of shrinking, something inside me roared. I stood up, my chair scraping the floor, and locked eyes with them. "If I'm so useless," I said, my voice steady now, "then stop expecting me to run this family's life. I'm done holding everything together while you tear me apart." The room fell silent. Mom's face paled. My sister's smirk vanished, and Dad looked away, uncomfortable. Even my brother seemed stunned, his usual confidence gone. Grandpa's eyes met mine, a quiet nod of support, but I didn't wait for anyone to respond. My heart was racing, but I felt a strange clarity. I'd finally said it. As I turned to leave, Grandpa's voice cut through the silence. "You should be ashamed," he said, his tone sharp, glaring at Mom and Dad. "Colleen's been nothing but loyal, and you treat her like she's invisible." Mom's face tightened, but she didn't respond. Dad shifted in his seat, avoiding Grandpa's gaze. My sister scoffed, muttering, "Here we go, with the dramatics." I stopped at the doorway, my hands trembling. I couldn't walk away without them knowing the truth. "You think I'm useless?" I said, turning back to face them. "Let me tell you what I've done for this family." My voice was steady, but my heart raced. When Grandpa was sick, I turned down a book deal, a major one, to drive him to every chemo session. I was there. Not my brother, not my sister. Me. Grandpa's eyes softened, but Mom interrupted, her voice cold. "That's your duty as family, Colleen. Don't act like a martyr." My sister smirked, adding, "Yeah, stop fishing for praise." I ignored them and kept going. "And you," I said, pointing at my sister. "Your big 30th birthday party, I spent weeks organizing it, booking the venue, picking your favorite flowers. You didn't even say thank you. You just bragged about your new job while I cleaned up." My sister's face flushed, her smirk gone. "That's ridiculous," she snapped. "I could have hired someone to do that." Dad finally spoke, his voice hesitant. "Colleen, we didn't know. I mean, we appreciated it." But his words felt hollow, and I shook my head. "No, you didn't," I said. "You never do. You praise my brother's tech deals and my sister's promotions, but my efforts? They're nothing to you." Grandpa stood leaning on his cane. She's right, he said, his voice firm. You two? He pointed at Mom and Dad, have always favored the others. Colleen's been the backbone and you've ignored her. Mom's jaw clenched and she snapped. Don't lecture me, Dad. We've done plenty for her. Dad rubbed his temples, muttering, let's not make this worse. But it was too late. The room erupted into chaos. My sister stood yelling, you're just jealous, Colleen. You're twisting everything to make us look bad. My brother, usually quiet, tried to calm her. Let's talk this out, he said, but his voice was drowned out by Mom's sharp retort. You're ungrateful, she said to me. We gave you everything and this is how you repay us. Dad just sat there looking lost, unable to meet my eyes. I took a step back, my chest tight. I've given everything, I said, my voice breaking. I've sacrificed my time, my career, my peace, and you still call me useless. I'm done. I turned again, ignoring my sister's shouts and Mom's protests. Grandpa called after me. You're enough, Colleen, but I couldn't look back. I grabbed my coat and walked out into the cold Kansas City night. I drove straight to Kristen's apartment, my hands shaking on the wheel. She opened the door before I could knock, her face full of concern. What happened? She asked, pulling me inside. You okay? She asked, her voice gentle but firm. I nodded, though my throat was tight. I just walked out on my family. I said my words heavy. I told them I'm done holding everything together. Kristen sat beside me, her eyes steady. You were brave, Colleen, she said. They've taken you for granted for too long. You don't owe them anything. Her words hit hard, grounding me. I'd known Kristen since college, and she'd always been my rock, the one who saw my worth when my family didn't. I keep thinking maybe I overreacted, I admitted. But I'm so tired of their dismissal. You didn't overreact, Kristen said firmly. They crossed a line. Calling you useless. That's not family, that's cruelty. I took a shaky breath, her words sinking in. I told them about my engagement, my book deal, I said. They didn't even blink. Just kept praising my brother and sister. Kristen shook her head. That's their loss, not yours. You're building an incredible life. They don't get to claim credit for it. My phone lit up again, a text from Mom. Colleen, you're being dramatic. Come back and talk it, Reed. I showed Kristen and she snorted. Dramatic. She's the one who called you useless. Another text came through from my sister. You're making this about you as usual. We didn't mean it like that. I rolled my eyes, my anger flaring. They don't even see what they did wrong, I said. Kristen leaned forward. They're trying to guilt you back. Don't let them. I nodded, my resolve hardening. I opened my phone and blocked Mom's number, then my sister's. My fingers hesitated over Dad's, but his silence at dinner stung just as much. I blocked him too. I'm done with their excuses, I said, my voice steady. Kristen squeezed my hand. Good. You deserve people who lift you up, not tear you down. A few days later, my brother called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Colleen. I'm sorry, he said, his voice soft. I didn't realize how much you've been doing for us. I should have spoken up. I listened, my heart conflicted. He'd never been as cruel as Mom or my sister, but his silence had hurt just the same. I appreciate that, I said, but it's too late. I've spent years trying to prove myself to you all. I'm not doing it anymore. He paused, then said, I get it. I hope we can talk someday. I didn't respond, just hung up and blocked his number too. It wasn't easy, part of me still wanted his approval, but I knew Kristen was right. I had to choose myself. You did the right thing, Kristen said when I told her. He's not a bad guy, but he's part of the problem. You're not obligated to fix their mess. Over the next week, Kristen checked in daily, bringing takeout or dragging me out for coffee to keep my spirits up. We talked about my engagement, my book deal, and how I wanted to move forward. You've got so much going for you, she said one evening, her voice warm. Focus on that. Let them figure out their own lives. Her support felt like a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't alone. I started to feel lighter, like I'd shed a burden I'd carried for years. Blocking my family wasn't just about anger, it was about reclaiming my peace. I didn't need their validation anymore. I had Kristen, my fiancé, and my own dreams to chase. For the first time, I believed I could build a life without their shadow. Months after I walked away, I heard whispers about my family's struggles. My cousin, who still kept in touch, mentioned that Mom and Dad hadn't hosted their annual summer barbecue, something I'd always organized. Without me, they couldn't pull it together. My sister, meanwhile, had lost a major client at work, a deal she'd bragged about for months. Apparently, her stress was obvious, and her colleagues noticed her usual confidence crumbling. I didn't feel joy hearing this, but I didn't feel guilty either. For once, I wasn't the one fixing their messes. I focused on my own life instead. After months of negotiations, I signed a major book deal with a publisher in New York, one that dwarfed the one I'd turned down years ago to care for Grandpa. The advance was enough to change everything. Justin and I sat down one evening, spreadsheets open, and started planning. We could buy a place, he said, his eyes bright with excitement. Somewhere that's ours. I nodded, my heart full. We found a cozy apartment in Kansas City with big windows and a small balcony perfect for morning coffee. Signing the papers felt like a victory, a step toward a future I'd built myself. Kristen was there every step of the way. She helped us pick out furniture, joking about my terrible taste in throw pillows. One night over pizza at our new place, she raised a glass. "To you, Colleen," she said, grinning. "You're killing it." I laughed, clinking my glass against hers. Her support had carried me through the darkest moments, and now we were closer than ever, planning weekly dinners and even a trip to Chicago for a writers' conference she insisted I attend. Grandpa, too, became a constant in my life. I'd visit him every Sunday, bringing takeout and old history books he loved. He'd share stories of his teaching days, his eyes lighting up as we talked. "You're my pride," he told me once, his voice soft. "Don't ever let them make you doubt that." I hugged him tightly, grateful for his unwavering belief in me. He never mentioned Mom or Dad, and I didn't ask. That part of my life was closed. My family's absence left a strange quiet. I'd blocked their numbers, but my cousin's updates painted a picture. Mom was struggling to keep family traditions alive, complaining to relatives about how things fell apart. My sister's career wasn't as invincible as she'd claimed, and she'd stopped posting her usual polished updates online. Dad apparently spent more time in his workshop, avoiding everyone. My brother had reached out once more, leaving a voicemail I didn't return. His apology lingered in my mind, but it wasn't enough to pull me back. I poured my energy into my work. My book, a novel about a woman breaking free from expectations, was gaining buzz even before its release. My editor called one morning, thrilled about early reviews. "This is going to be big, Colleen," she said. I hung up smiling and told Justin the news. He pulled me into a hug, whispering, "I knew you'd do it." We celebrated that night with Kristen, who insisted on popping champagne and toasting to the author who proved them all wrong. Moving into our apartment felt like a fresh start. Justin and I spent weekends decorating, arguing playfully over paint colors. I set up a small office in the corner with a desk by the window where I could write. For the first time, I felt like my life was mine, not defined by my family's judgment or their endless demands. Kristen stopped by, often bringing her infectious energy, and Grandpa's visits filled the place with warmth. I was building a new family, one that saw me for who I was. As I stood on our balcony one evening looking out at the city lights, I realized I was free. My family's struggles weren't my burden anymore. I had Justin, Kristen, Grandpa, and my own strength to carry me forward. The future felt wide open, and I was ready to write my own story. A year after, I stood in a small garden ready to marry Justin. The air was warm, filled with the scent of blooming flowers, and the setting sun cast a golden glow over our handful of guests. I'd chosen a simple white dress, nothing flashy, and Justin looked at me like I was the only person in the world. We'd planned a tiny wedding just the way we wanted, intimate, meaningful hours. Only Kristen and Grandpa sat in the front row, their smiles brighter than the summer sky. Kristen, my maid of honor, adjusted my veil with a grin. "You're stunning," she whispered, her eyes sparkling. I squeezed her hand, grateful for her unwavering presence. Grandpa, in his best suit, leaned on his cane and winked at me. "You've made this old man proud," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I fought back tears, knowing their love was all I needed today. My family, Mom, Dad, my sister, my brother, wasn't invited. I hadn't spoken to them since I blocked their numbers, and I felt no regret. This day was for those who saw my worth. The ceremony was short, but heartfelt. Justin and I exchanged vows we'd written ourselves, promising to build a life of trust and joy. When he slid the ring onto my finger, I felt a weight lift, like the past was finally behind me. Kristen cheered louder than anyone when we kissed, and Grandpa clapped his smile wide. Afterward, we gathered at a small reception in a nearby barn decorated with fairy lights and wildflowers. Kristen gave a toast, her voice steady. "To Colleen," she said, raising her glass, "for choosing herself and showing us what strength looks like." I blushed, clinking glasses with her and Justin. As we danced under the stars, I thought about the journey that brought me here. I'd spent years trying to win my family's approval, bending over backward to keep them together. But that Thanksgiving, when they called me useless, something shifted. I learned that love shouldn't come with conditions. Setting boundaries wasn't selfish, it was survival. I'd walked away from people who diminished me, and in their place I found those who lifted me up. Kristen, with her fierce loyalty, and Grandpa, with his quiet wisdom, showed me what family could mean. Justin, my partner, reminded me every day that I was enough. My book had launched a few months earlier, climbing bestseller lists. Readers sent letters saying my story about breaking free resonated with them. That success paired with our new apartment and this wedding felt like a dream I'd fought hard to earn. I didn't gloat about my family's struggles, Mom's failed traditions, my sister's lost deal, Dad's withdrawal, or my brother's silence. Their absence no longer hurt. I'd built a life that didn't need their validation. Looking at Justin laughing as he spun me on the dance floor, I felt whole. Kristen joined us, pulling Grandpa into a gentle sway, and we all laughed, the moment perfect. I'd chosen this people who respected me, who saw my heart. That was the lesson I carried now. You don't have to stay where you're not valued. You can walk away, set boundaries, and build something better. It's not easy, but it's worth it. I turned to the camera, knowing this story would reach others. If you've ever felt unseen, I said, my voice clear, know that you're not alone. Choose the people who choose you. Set those boundaries. Your worth isn't defined by those who can't see it. I paused, smiling. And if you've got a story like mine, share it below. Let's lift each other up. With that, I turned back to Justin, ready for the life we'd create together.